The thing about getting older is you start to trust patterns. You wake up at the same time, drive the same route to work, drink your coffee the same way, and go to bed next to the same person, assuming that nothing will change. It's like muscle memory for your life. Until one day, something small, something stupid, completely unremarkable, rips a hole in the routine, and you realize you've been blind for God knows how long. For me, it was a scarf. I know, not exactly the stuff of crime thrillers. No lipstick on a collar, no strange number scribbled on a napkin, no missing chunks of time explained away with a vague, just running errands. Just a scarf, sitting exactly where it shouldn't have been. It was a hideous thing. Bright green with these weird, frilly ends that looked like they belonged to someone who spent their weekends at farmers' markets, debating the ethics of artisanal honey. It wasn't Christine's. I knew that because Christine had taste, or at least, I thought she did. I found it draped over the armrest of the couch one Saturday morning. It stood out in the room like someone had dropped a neon sign that read "You're a moron, Samuel." "Christine," I called out, holding it up like a contaminated piece of evidence. "Since when did you start dressing like a retired art teacher?" She walked in from the bedroom, a mug in one hand, her phone in the other, looking way too relaxed for someone whose entire life was about to be cross-examined. "What?" She blinked at me like I was speaking in riddles. "This," I said, giving the scarf a little shake. "When exactly did this thing slither into our home?" Her reaction was immediate but not what I expected. Not nervous laughter, not a dramatic gasp of realization, just an infuriatingly casual shrug. "Oh. I think it's Ellie's. She must have left it here." Ellie, her best friend. The human equivalent of an overcaffeinated squirrel. "Ellie," I repeated slowly, turning the scarf over in my hands like it might start talking if I held it long enough. "Ellie, who exclusively wears beige because she thinks colors are overwhelming to the spirit? Ellie, who once said she doesn't believe in accessories because jewelry is a capitalist prison? That Ellie?" Christine sighed, the way you do when someone insists on reading the fine print out loud. "Maybe it's someone else's, then." "I don't know, Sam, it's just a scarf." "Why are you making a thing out of this?" Why was I making a thing out of this? Maybe because things don't just appear out of nowhere. Maybe because I suddenly felt like I had walked into the middle of a movie and missed the first half. Or maybe because I wasn't as stupid as Christine thought I was. See, there's a certain arrogance that comes with lying. A person who's lying to you, really lying, thinks they're the smartest one in the room. They assume you're not paying attention, that you're too busy or too trusting or too wrapped up in your own life to notice the cracks forming right under your nose. Christine thought I wasn't paying attention. So, I did what any self-respecting man would do. I let it go. At least, that's what I wanted her to think. The thing about marriage is that, after a while, you become fluent in the other person's habits. You know how they drink their coffee, what shows they pretend to like for your sake, how they word their texts when they're in a good mood versus when they're annoyed. And you know when something's off. Christine had been acting off for weeks. It wasn't anything dramatic, no sudden changes in schedule, no suspiciously cheerful humming while she scrolled through her phone. Just little things. The way she'd set her alarm earlier than usual but still left at the same time. The way she'd linger in her car before coming inside, like she needed a moment to shift back into wife mode. So, I started paying attention. And that's how I found it. Not the scarf. That was just the first breadcrumb. I found the real clue while doing something as mundane as taking out the trash. There was a receipt crumpled at the bottom of the bin, almost completely hidden under coffee grounds and a half-eaten sandwich. Normally, I wouldn't have thought twice about it, but something made me reach in and fish it out. Call it instinct. Call it paranoia. Call it the first real test of my sanity. It was from a diner across town. A diner Christine had no reason to be at. And it was for two people. Now, I know what you're thinking. Samuel, maybe she just had lunch with a friend. And you know what? That's fair. Maybe I was about to ruin my own weekend over nothing. Except Christine doesn't eat at diners. Christine, the same woman who once sent a salad back because it had croutons, does not eat at places that serve burgers on wax paper. So, who was she with? That's when I decided I wasn't going to ask her. Because here's another thing about people who lie, they're always ready for the obvious questions. Where were you? Who were you with? Those are questions they've rehearsed answers for. I wanted to catch her off guard. That night, over dinner, I casually mentioned the diner. Did you know that place on Harper Avenue has the best milkshakes in the city? I said, cutting into my steak. Christine barely looked up from her plate. That diner. The one across town. I read an article about it. People swear by their shakes. For the smallest fraction of a second, so small you'd miss it if you weren't looking, her fork hesitated before reaching her mouth. Oh, she said, too casually. I think Ellie mentioned it once. Ellie. Again. I almost smiled. It was fascinating, really. The way she was so quick to throw out a name, as if that settled everything. Like I wasn't sitting right there, watching her avoid eye contact, pretending this conversation wasn't setting her nerves on fire. I didn't press it. I just nodded, took a sip of my drink, and let the silence stretch. Because now, I didn't just suspect something. I knew. I didn't do anything drastic right away. I didn't storm into the room demanding answers, I didn't pull out a hidden detective board with red strings connecting various locations, and I certainly didn't sit in the dark nursing a glass of whiskey while contemplating life. That's the thing about catching a liar, they expect you to react. They brace for impact, already armed with excuses, half-truths, and just enough tears to make you feel like a monster for doubting them in the first place. So, I did the opposite. I played dumb. I went about my life, pretending everything was as boring and routine as it had always been. I still kissed Christine on the cheek before leaving for work, still sent her random texts about nothing important, still asked about her day with the same level of enthusiasm as a grocery store cashier forced to make small talk. And while she went about hers, probably thinking she was in the clear, I started collecting information. Christine wasn't careless, but she wasn't as smart as she thought she was either. I tested the waters first, casually bringing up things I knew would make her nervous just to watch her reaction. A simple "Hey, did you and Ellie go anywhere fun this week?" should have been an easy question, but she over-explained like she was submitting an alibi in court. Then there was the sudden interest in fitness, which was particularly fascinating because I distinctly remembered Christine once saying, "I'd rather pay someone to carry me than run for exercise." Yet, suddenly, she was taking long evening walks. Alone. For her health. Interesting. So, I started tracking the so-called health walks, not in a creepy way, just in a this doesn't add up way. Christine left the house at 7:30 every other evening, always in workout clothes that looked suspiciously untouched by sweat when she returned. She was gone exactly an hour, never early, never late, as if she had a perfectly timed appointment with fresh air. Now, if she had actually been out walking, there'd be signs, sore legs, a complaint about blisters, maybe even a water bottle left on the counter. But no. Christine would return home as if she had just spent an hour sitting in an air-conditioned waiting room, completely unaffected. That's when I decided to follow her. I had to be smart about it. If she caught me tailing her, she'd flip the script so fast, I'd be the one apologizing by the end of the night. So, I waited for the perfect moment, and when Tuesday rolled around, the usual walk day, I told her I had to work late. Christine left right on schedule, her shoes practically brand new despite weeks of these supposed strolls. I counted to 50 after she closed the door, grabbed my keys, and made my way to the street. It wasn't hard to keep my distance. She wasn't looking over her shoulder, because why would she? As far as she knew, I was stuck in my office, blissfully unaware of the ridiculous game she was playing. She walked for exactly 3 blocks before stopping. Then, just like that, she got into a car. It wasn't Ellie's car. It wasn't anyone's car that I recognized. But what mattered was that it was waiting for her, perfectly timed, engine running. And Christine? She didn't hesitate. She got in like she'd done it 100 times before, and the car pulled away. I didn't chase after it. That would have been stupid. Instead, I went home, sat on the couch, and did what any logical man would do in my situation. I sent her a text. Me, hey, how's the walk? A full 8 minutes passed before she answered. Christine, good. Just taking a break. It's such a nice night. Yeah. I bet it was. Now, this was the part where I could have confronted her. Could have held up the phone and said, "So, are we pretending that car you got into was just a new type of treadmill?" But again, expected. No, I wanted proof. Because liars can wiggle out of anything if you don't have solid, undeniable proof. They'll cry, they'll twist your words, they'll make you doubt reality itself. So, I got proof. The next day, I took a personal day from work. Christine thought I was out, just like usual, which gave me all the time in the world to dig through our house in search of something, anything, that would point to the mystery car and its driver. Christine wasn't stupid, though. No obvious evidence. No dramatic letters, no receipts carelessly left behind. Then I checked the trash. And there it was. Not a receipt. Not a love note. Something way better. A folded-up flyer for a dance studio. And not just any dance studio. This was a ballroom dance class. Christine, the woman who once claimed the only time I dance is when I'm dodging bees, was suddenly very interested in ballroom dancing. And she had paid for a session. Now, I know what you're thinking. Maybe she was learning for fun. Yeah, sure. And maybe I was born yesterday. Christine wasn't taking ballroom dance lessons by herself. And that meant only one thing: someone else was teaching her. That night, I casually brought up dancing. I saw this video of a guy absolutely failing at salsa dancing, I said over dinner. He tripped and took down an entire line of dancers. Made me think, have you ever wanted to learn how to dance? Christine barely looked up from her plate. Me? Put. You know I don't have the coordination for that. Oh, yeah, I said, nodding. Totally. Just checking. And that's when I knew. Christine wasn't just lying. She was lying boldly. And bold liars? They always slip up. People say patience is a virtue, but those people clearly never had a wife who was sneaking around like a contestant on a badly written reality show. I had proof Christine was up to something, but I wasn't about to lay my cards on the table just yet. No, I wanted more. I wanted the kind of evidence that left absolutely no room for one of those dramatic, fake shock denials where she'd clutch her chest and gasp, "How could you even think that, Samuel?" So, I did what any reasonable husband would do. I signed up for ballroom dance lessons. Not at the same studio, of course. That would have been suicidal. But I figured if Christine was suddenly waltzing her way through deception, I should at least know what I was dealing with. Besides, what better way to understand her betrayal than by literally stepping into her shoes? Let me tell you something about ballroom dancing. It's ridiculous. I walked into that class thinking I'd pick up a couple of smooth moves, maybe even figure out why Christine thought this was the perfect hobby for her new secret life. Instead, I got partnered with a 70-year-old woman named Doris who treated me like I was auditioning for Dancing with the Stars, Senior Edition. "You're stiff, Samuel," Doris scolded as I tried to lead her through something that was allegedly a foxtrot. "You need to flow." "I'm not built for flowing, Doris," I muttered, already regretting every life decision that had led me to this moment. Still, I had to admit, the class gave me insight into just how intimate ballroom dancing could be. The hand placements, the way you had to move in sync, the fact that if you weren't comfortable with someone, the whole thing just felt unnatural. Christine had always been a personal space kind of woman, the type to flinch when strangers stood too close in grocery store lines. Yet, here she was, paying for lessons that required her to let someone get all up in her orbit? Yeah, sure. That made sense. By the end of the class, I hadn't exactly mastered the art of dance, but I had figured out my next move. I needed to find out who was teaching Christine. Because if she was anything like me, and let's be real, she wasn't, but let's pretend, she wouldn't just sign up for lessons with anyone. There had to be a reason. A connection. A someone. So, I got creative. I borrowed Ellie's name. The next morning, while Christine was in the shower, I casually mentioned that Ellie had been talking about wanting to try ballroom dancing. Christine didn't even blink, which was hilarious considering she'd just tried to sell me the idea that Ellie was her fake dance buddy. She should go for it, Christine said, toweling her hair dry like she hadn't just exposed herself. Oh, I told her about the place you go to, I added, watching her reaction carefully. She was thinking about signing up for a trial class. I figured maybe you could help her out? Christine didn't stop drying her hair, but I caught the slight hesitation before she answered. Oh. Yeah, sure. Sure. She was panicking. I knew it. I felt it. And it was glorious. But I didn't stop there. That afternoon, I took an early lunch and made my way to her dance studio. Not inside, because that would have been reckless. I just parked across the street and waited. And let me tell you, nothing makes you question your own intelligence more than sitting in a car like some budget spy, staring at the entrance of a dance studio while regular people go about their day like normal human beings. But then, at exactly 7:29, Christine showed up. And she wasn't alone. The guy who met her at the door wasn't just some instructor. No, this was a guy who knew Christine well enough to laugh before she even said anything, well enough to put a hand on her shoulder in a way that was a little too familiar for someone just there to teach her how to tango. And the best part? I knew him. I didn't know him personally, but I recognized him. His name was Ryan Beckett. Christine's high school ex. Oh, this just got interesting. Ryan Beckett. Of all the people Christine could have tangled herself up with, it had to be him. I didn't know much about Ryan beyond the fact that he was her high school boyfriend, the kind of guy who peaked at 17 and probably still thought his greatest achievement was scoring the winning touchdown at the homecoming game. I had met him once, years ago, at some reunion thing Christine dragged me to. He had that overly friendly, back-patting way of talking that guys who never got over being popular tend to have. The kind who would laugh a little too hard, stand a little too close, and still believe deep down that their exes never really moved on. And now here he was, teaching my wife ballroom dancing. I sat there watching them like I had just unlocked a secret level in a video game. Christine was standing there, smiling, laughing, comfortable. Not the awkward, oh, this is just a casual class kind of comfortable. No, this was familiar. Like they had picked up an old conversation from years ago and never stopped. I should have been mad. Furious, even. But honestly? I was entertained. Because this? This was a terrible choice on Christine's part. It was so predictable, so cliché, that it made my job way easier. People like Ryan don't do subtle. They don't do careful. They do obvious. And if Ryan was involved, this whole thing was going to unravel spectacularly. Now, I could have confronted Christine right then and there. Could have walked up, said something snarky, and watched her scramble for an excuse. But where was the fun in that? No, I wanted all the details first. I wanted to see exactly how far this had gone before I burned the whole thing to the ground. So, I waited. Christine was inside for a little over an hour before she walked out, her hair still annoyingly perfect for someone who had allegedly been dancing. Ryan followed a few minutes later, leaning in close to say something that made her laugh in that way she didn't laugh at my jokes anymore. Interesting. I let them leave without making a move. Instead, I went home and did what any self-respecting husband does when he realizes his wife is lying through her teeth. I got online. Ryan wasn't hard to find. A quick search pulled up his social media, a painfully predictable mix of gym selfies, motivational quotes, and pictures of steaks he probably overcooked. But the real goldmine? His business page. Turns out, Ryan owned the dance studio. Christine hadn't just randomly picked a place to learn how to waltz. She had gone directly to an old flame, signed up for his classes, and somehow thought I'd never notice. Absolutely incredible. Now, I had options. I could keep playing the waiting game, see how long Christine thought she could keep up this performance. Or I could start pressing buttons, poking at her lies just to watch them fall apart. I decided on both. The next morning, while Christine was getting ready, I casually leaned against the doorway and said, "Hey, you never told me how you found that dance studio." She paused for half a second, just enough for me to enjoy it, then smiled. "Oh, I just Googled a few places and picked one with good reviews." I nodded. "Right. Makes sense. A lot of options out there. Kinda crazy, though, that the one you picked just so happens to be run by Ryan Beckett." Silence. Not long silence. Just half a second too long silence. Then, she did what all bad liars do. She played fool. "Ryan? Wait, Ryan Beckett? From high school?" "No, Christine, Ryan Beckett from space." "Yes, Ryan Beckett from high school." She let out a laugh that didn't quite land. "Wow, I had no idea. That's crazy. Small world. Small world." I stared at her, waiting to see if she'd try to add anything else, maybe throw in a "what a coincidence" for extra flavor. But no. She just smiled and went back to pretending like her entire story wasn't held together by chewing gum and desperation. Fine. She wanted to keep up the act? I'd let her. But now? Now I was going to enjoy watching it crumble. Christine's problem was simple: she was an amateur. If you're going to cheat, and let me be clear here, I don't recommend it, at least have the common sense to not make it so painfully easy to catch. But Christine? She had all the strategic thinking of a reality show contestant who forgot cameras existed. She actually thought she could just laugh off the Ryan Beckett situation. Just a little "wow, what a small world," and poof, no further questions. Adorable. I let it sit for a few days, acted like I had bought the lie, even made some generic comments about how impressive it was that she was sticking with a new hobby. Christine lapped it up, completely unaware that while she was busy perfecting her tango, I was perfecting something else. See, I wasn't just going to confront her. No, that would be too easy. Christine had spent months disrespecting me behind my back, so it was only fair that I return the favor in a much grander way. First, I needed to know how deep this little extracurricular activity went. Was this just a nostalgia-fueled ego trip? Or had they really upgraded to the full-blown, cliché affair package? I needed confirmation. That's when I decided to go straight to the source. Now, Ryan Beckett wasn't bright, but he was predictable. And predictable people? They're easy to manipulate. I waited until I knew Christine would be at work, then called Ryan's studio under a fake name. I had zero doubts he'd pick up. Guys like him love hearing their own voices. "Ryan Beckett speaking," he answered, already sounding like a guy who still thought varsity football was a personality trait. I put on my best eager customer voice. "Hey, I was thinking about signing up for some private lessons, but I wanted to get some details first." He was immediately all in. These guys can smell easy money from a mile away. Of course. We offer different packages depending on your experience level. Have you ever danced before? Oh, I wouldn't say professionally, I said. But I have a little experience. My wife's been taking lessons with you for a while, and she keeps telling me I should join her. Really? Who's your wife? Hook, line, sinker. Christine, I said, waiting. Silence. Not long silence, but just enough to tell me everything. Christine, oh, yeah, Christine. Right. Great student. Yeah, I said. She told me her instructor was fantastic. Said you've been working really closely together. Ryan let out this nervous little chuckle, the kind a guy makes when he's trying to figure out if he just stepped into a bear trap. Well, I like to make sure my students get the best experience. Of course, I said. She's been really dedicated to these lessons. Always coming home sore, completely exhausted. Now, that got a reaction. He laughed again, but this time, it was forced. Yeah, ballroom dancing can be pretty intense. Oh, I bet it could. That was all I needed. This wasn't just Christine taking dance lessons for fun. This wasn't just a friendly catch-up between high school exes. No, this was Christine and Ryan thinking they were the main characters in some kind of second-chance romance story. Which meant it was time for me to do what every great villain does when the heroes get a little too comfortable. Flip the script. I spent the next 4 days putting together my masterpiece. Step 1. Leverage the studio. Ryan's studio, as it turns out, wasn't doing great financially. And lucky for me, I happened to know a guy, Ryan's landlord. I'd done some business with him years ago, and let's just say he wasn't exactly sentimental when it came to tenants who didn't keep up with their rent. A quick call, a very casual conversation, and suddenly Ryan had 30 days to either catch up on his payments or get ready to start teaching dance lessons in a parking lot. Step 2. Expose Christine in a way she'd never forget. Christine had an event coming up. A big one. A fancy work function with all the people she'd been trying to impress for years. She'd spent weeks talking about it, planning her outfit, making sure she'd look perfect. And that's exactly where I was going to publicly rip her entire fantasy world apart. I sent an anonymous email to her office. Nothing dramatic, nothing over the top, just a simple, elegant message attached with photos. Photos of Christine and Ryan leaving the studio together. Photos of Christine sitting in Ryan's car, smiling like she didn't have a husband at home. And, just for a little extra spice, a final note that read, "Be careful who you dance with. Some partners already have a ring on their finger." The best part? I timed the email to be delivered right in the middle of her event. So, while Christine was busy sipping champagne and shaking hands, her entire office got a front row seat to her real extracurricular activities. Step 3. Sit back and enjoy the fireworks. Christine came home 2 hours later than usual. Not because she had some elaborate excuse, no, because she had been too busy dealing with the fallout. She walked in the door looking like she had just survived a natural disaster. Makeup slightly smudged, hair not quite as perfect, hands clutching her phone like it was her last lifeline. I was on the couch, completely relaxed. "Good night?" She opened her mouth, then paused. She knew. She knew I had something to do with it, but she couldn't prove it. She started, but I just held up a hand. "Christine," I said, "do me a favor. Don't embarrass yourself by lying." Her lips pressed together so tightly I thought they might disappear. I stood up, stretched, and grabbed my keys. "Oh, by the way," I added casually, "Ryan's losing his studio." "Thought you'd want to know." Her face drained of all color. "You." But I was already walking out. Because this? This was only the beginning. Christine didn't speak to me for 3 days. Which, honestly, was the best gift she'd given me in years. The silence was beautiful. Peaceful. I'd wake up, drink my coffee without hearing her complain about the temperature being off, go about my day without getting one of her passive-aggressive texts about something I forgot to do, and fall asleep without the sound of her sighing like being married to me was some tragic life sentence. Of course, I knew it wouldn't last. People like Christine don't handle losing well. They don't just accept reality and move on. No, they scramble. They plot. They refuse to go down quietly. And on the 4th day, she finally broke. It started with the dramatic slamming of her bag on the kitchen counter. A classic move, really. A warm-up before the real performance. "You," she said, her voice so tight it sounded like she'd spent the last 3 days screaming into a pillow. I took a sip of my coffee. "Morning to you too, sunshine." Her nostrils flared. "You ruined my job." "Did I?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "Or did you ruin it yourself by bringing your personal dance instructor into the office gossip mill?" Her jaw clenched. "I got demoted, Samuel." I let out a low whistle. "Wow. That's rough. I mean, that's what happens when people find out you've been sneaking around with someone way below company standards." She actually growled. "Do you think this is funny?" "Christine, I think this is the most entertained I've been in years." Her eyes flickered toward the door, as if she was debating whether it was worth staying and fighting or just retreating to plan her next move. But I wasn't done yet. I leaned back, completely relaxed. "By the way, how's Ryan?" She froze. I smirked. "Oh, you didn't hear? Poor guy's studio is shutting down next month. Guess rent payments are important after all." Her face went pale, and for the first time, I saw something I hadn't expected. Panic. Not anger. Not frustration. Actual fear. And that's when I knew. Christine had bet on Ryan. She wasn't just having a fling. She was lining up her next move. And now, that move had been completely obliterated. Ryan wasn't going to be some new, exciting chapter in her life. He was now a financial liability. A washed-up high school hero with a failing business, no stability, and absolutely nothing to offer. I almost laughed. Christine had spent months disrespecting me, treating me like I was some placeholder she could eventually upgrade. And now, she had nothing. She squared her shoulders, eyes narrowing. "Are you happy now?" I thought about it for a second. Then I smiled. Yeah, I really am." Christine exhaled sharply through her nose and stormed out, leaving me in the kitchen with my perfectly made coffee and a much clearer future. A week later, I filed for divorce. Christine tried everything to get me to reconsider. Not because she suddenly realized she loved me, but because she had no backup plan. Her career? Ruined. Her lover? Useless. Her marriage? Gone. And me? I had never felt lighter. Thanks for watching. Please hit the like button and rate the story in the comments.